But going back to Joel Skousen, Joel, so what is the larger, let's spend 10 minutes then go to calls, on the 3 power blocks. Undoubtedly the globalists in their own documents say that is the power blocks. You're very accurate in that research. So what are the power blocks up to? What does this Ukraine thing mean? When will Russia be ready for the strike? Will they strike us with China? And but start off with Georgia, because from when I looked at, that was a real attack. What was that about?
Well, that was the West in combination with Israel, because, you know, what the West does to have plausible deniability about directly giving military arms to something to exacerbate the Russian and former Soviet state situation. They use Israel. Israel, a lot of Americans don't realize that they use Israel to send a lot of military technology to China, which is going to be our #1 enemy someday, even more, you know, greater than Russia. And people would be incensed if they knew that Israel had a green light to transfer technology to China. But they also did it to Abkhazia and South Ossetia. These are the 2 semi-autonomous regions of Georgia that wanted to defect and become independent. And of course, the West normally does, you know, like to encourage independence, but really they knew that Russia wasn't going to let that happen, and they did that to simply tweak Russia. Russia did, in fact, have to use military power to come in, because of the fact that they had Israeli advisors in there. It looked to them like they were really trying to use military force to break away. This is entirely different than what happened in the Ukraine. Remember, the opposition has no military forces, none whatsoever, maybe only a handful of hunting rifles. There's no way that they could have done a coup, and that's why Russia has no reason to come in and to do a military, you know, invasion to retake Ukraine. So
you're saying just like Arab Spring, the West knows a rebellion's coming, Russia knows it's coming, so they pre-trigger it so they can then control it, discredit it later.
And even worse, the prime minister today is saying he's accusing Russia of trying to invade Ukraine based upon the same phony information that I just told your audience about in Crimea. This is not Russian troops coming in from outside Crimea. These are Russian troops already in Crimea by prior agreement with Ukraine. They're simply shuffling some forces around to make sure that all the military bases are protected. Now, I'm not defending Russia, but they're tweaking the nose of the West, and the new Ukrainian government is tweaking the nose of Russia. But this is all political theater. Nothing is going to happen in a major military way. This is just the onset of continual conflict. And getting back to the bigger picture here, it's my estimation, based upon what I've studied about Russian rearmament and China rearmament, or actual armament. They aren't rearming, but engaged in massive armament, especially of missile forces. They still aren't going to be ready until at least 2020. And even though they're ready, that doesn't mean that there's going to be a strike in 2020. It's going to be sometime in the next decade, not before. Now, as you get closer to the point when they're ready, if they see an opportunity, it's possible that they could strike earlier than that. So I'm not trying to say that there's a definitive time that anyone, I mean, we're talking about 3 different multiple conspiracies here. There's no way anyone can say this is going to happen on a certain date. But we can tell when, by their own statements, they feel like they're going to be ready with their newest weapon systems. And everything out of the Russian system and the Chinese talks about post-2020 in terms of being ready with new aircraft carriers, with new submarines, with their new missile systems. And all the while, of course, the U.S. is disarming. We haven't built a new missile in 20 years, and we're shooting off what Minuteman III missiles we have and not replacing them. I mean, it's an incredible suicidal mission of the West to try to set the stage. And what they have to do, remember, they have to induce Russia and China to strike. As strong as they are getting, they still have, especially Russia, has a lot of decrepit systems, a lot of older systems. They got quantity. They don't have a lot of quality except in their newest systems, and they're very low in quantity of those things. But the globalists continue to have to disarm to induce them to strike. And the big picture I want to put out is, and people don't understand, why is it the globalists would want to bring on a nuclear strike onto America? And it's because you can't get Americans to give up essential freedoms, national sovereignty, and yield to a global government unless the U.S. military gets taken down. If they let the U.S. military get taken down in a preemptive nuclear strike, then they can come out of their bunkers, and our leaders are building huge underground bunkers because they know this strike is coming. If they come out of their bunkers and say, oh, the Russians and Chinese deceived us, we didn't know this was going to happen, but our only salvation now is to join together with NATO and other forces and form a new world government to prosecute this war, and literally everyone will lay down and say, save us, do whatever it takes. We don't care about sovereignty, just do what it takes. That's why this is going to happen. But they do have secret weapon systems. I believe they have space-based weapon systems that are going to be used to stop any further strikes while the West regroups and pulls out a lot of secret military weapons that they've been developing, not to defend us with, but to prosecute this war afterwards. I'm projecting that Russia will be defeated eventually in that war because the West will cut a deal with China to betray Russia and turn on its rear, and Russia can't win. Now, here's the advantage for China in that. He gets to eliminate the other third leg of the conspiracy for the New World Order, and then it's only China versus the West. And then the West wants that. They want a reinvigorated China. They'll use, just like we invigorated Russia during World War II by giving them all that aid and Lend-Lease, we'll do the same with China. Because the West wanted the Cold War, they wanted this great enemy because it would justify so much more militarization. And the globalists will want an enemy, a Cold War enemy after World War III to justify keeping all of the militarized troops of the world government.
And by the way, these same elites stirred up World War I and World War II, and in so many of their writings, they say they need something bigger than a regional war. Rand Corporation and others have said in the last 3 years they need a World War III to get the Anglo-American world government in place. So, I mean,
and to keep it militarized, Alex, to keep it militarized, they need a war big enough that they've got an enemy on the other side. You can't win it all. That's why they sabotaged and didn't let us win against Russia. In fact, we let Russia. Sure,
that's why they didn't let Patton go in and beat Stalin or MacArthur, because they wanted to keep him there.
That's right. So we're going to have, after World War III, a powerful world government with a global military and a global taxation system, a new currency. Remember, you can't have a collapse of the dollar in a new currency unless you have a world government to manage it. They're certainly not going to let, if the dollar collapsed, they wouldn't let the Fed reconstitute a new currency. And the Fed isn't going to let control of world finance. That's why I keep saying there's not going to be an economic collapse until this war comes. And that gives the powers that be cover. It's not their fault then if the economy collapses, because war did it.
Oh, it's clear. Notice they staged 9/11 right as the .com went under.
Exactly.
I mean, they're always pulling stuff so they don't get the blame. Now, I want to go to phone calls, but let me be more domestic here. The constant attack on men, the constant attack on women in traditional roles, the attack on children, the feminization, all of this, what is the goal behind that? I mean, I've got my views on it. I don't think I've ever asked you your views, Joel Skousen, about the war on men, because it is really kicking into high gear right now.
Well, this goes back to what we've talked about before, that at the bottom, this is a satanic conspiracy. He's giving direction. This is a real person, just like God is real, fighting against God and all that is good. There's no globalist purpose, you know, for emasculating manhood or destroying Western culture and other things, other than the fact, or promoting homosexuality for that, unless you want to destroy the moral fiber of a nation. And that's why this multifaceted front that you've so eloquently described is really something that is satanic. And it isn't a uniform conspiracy in the sense that anyone involved is being dictated to. You know, just like God speaks to conscience, Satan's in there all the time as well. And you have innately liberal people, innately immoral people who get those little hints from conscience to go ahead and attack all that is good and to promote that which is evil and to emasculate masculinity and promote feminism and all of this. And they can do that without conspiracy, that is, of a human variety. Because the grandest conspiracy is the fact that Satan himself works a multifaceted front in people's minds, through organizations, through leadership, that he is allowed to get people into.
Sure, it's a spiritual sickness.
Yes, it is.
But it's so obvious now.
And it's not easy to overcome. You know, yes, repentance and returning to Jesus Christ is the answer, but we can't force those things. We can only do that by invitation and so that's why the battle is one of dividing society. And that's what I see coming up to this war is more and more society is going to be divided between those that see that there's a conspiracy, that they control both political parties, those that have a moral foundation. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of Christian churches are being suborned by becoming mainstream and not being, and being afraid of being criticized for being extreme and radical. Pastor Chuck Baldwin has some marvelous writings about and criticisms about the mainstream Christian churches and how they're basically getting into the New World Order without.
They're taking government money and literally just spouting whatever the mainstream media says now.
Yeah, yeah.
I tell you, what's the time frame, do you think? 5 to 10 years till they try this World War III thing?
As I say, I don't think it's coming before 2020. Now, as you get closer to that, I mean, you can't hold me to that because they could take an opportunity to move forward. But I think we've still got a good 5 years to fight this battle.
And you're saying we see North Korea start shelling Seoul, get out of major cities.
That's right. Because that's going to be the trigger event of World War III. There has to be some reason why they treat North Korea with kid gloves, that they don't ever have a military option for taking them down, or regime change. They know North Korea is going to be the trigger to start it. We may have to use tactical nuclear weapons to stop that kind of attack, and that will justify China and Russia for initiating a nuclear preemptive strike because we started with tactical nuclear weapons.
And they have the PDDs in place where the sub-commanders and silo commanders can't fire back. They'll be totally destroyed.
That's right. You know, our sub and missile commanders believe that they're going to be given the orders to launch on warning when Russia and China launch against us. But I don't believe those orders are ever going to arrive.
And for those that don't know, until the PDDs got changed under Clinton and continued by Bush and Obama, if the missiles are tracking in, they have the authorization to defend. Now they've taken that away.
That's right. And they have told them in PDD 60, 1997, to prepare to retaliate after absorbing a nuclear first strike that don't depend on, they didn't actually tell them you're not going to be able to launch. They just said don't depend on it. Structure your system so that you can retaliate after absorbing a nuclear first strike. And General Butch Neal of the Marine Corps said, retaliate with what? He was just incensed. And especially since in that same year, Clinton agreed with the Russians that we would keep 50% of our missile submarines in port, either in Kings Bay, Georgia, or Bangor, Washington, to make it easier for the Russians to target them because they were in port. I mean, this is just incredible, Alex.
Yep, and meanwhile, the media pushes 24/7 to demonize the Tea Party. That's the big threat, the Homeland Security says. Let's talk to Michael in Oregon. You want to talk about U.S. flags being banned? You're on the air with Joel Skousen. Go ahead.
Hey, Alex, Joel, it's a privilege, gentlemen. I got to tell you, Joel, what you say, it's overwhelming. I'm sitting here listening. It's overwhelming. I thank you for, the insight that you give us. My son today and I were talking about the USA flags being banned on T-shirts in California. And my son, who's 12, Connor, he said to me, Dad, that's just stupid. Out of the mouth of babes comes wisdom. And I thought I would ask you your take on that. I ordered a bunch of shirts, by the way. I'm going to pass them out, nice Texas shirts and USA shirts. But I think it's crazy. What do you think about it?
Well, California, like New York, is one of those vanguard states of the left, of the globalists who are testing the waters on everything. They're pushing the envelope and just banning patriotism, banning Americanism, banning American culture, just par for the course for the kind of government that you have in California. As a fellow Oregonian, I'll tell you, I wince at the Oregonian newspaper and, the liberal elite in Portland and Eugene. I expect them to follow suit pretty soon, too. What California does, Oregon does, a few years later.
And they're very proud of their anti-maleness. I'm seeing in the news now that it's offensive. Heterosexual couples, marriages, now see marriage itself as offensive. This isn't tolerance. This is, we're being conquered by this. The globalist social engineers are not just targeting us with propaganda. They are manipulating our genetics. We are being targeted at every level by estrogen mimickers that lower our testosterone and other hormones and natural compounds that the body needs. After consulting top doctors, nutritionists, pharmacists, and others, we have developed what I believe is the ultimate non-GMO organic super male vitality formula sourced from powerful organic herbs and then concentrated for maximum potency. Super male vitality was developed to activate your body's own natural processes instead of using synthetic chemicals. Super male vitality by InfoWars Life is so powerful that I only take half the recommended dose. For a limited time, we are offering 15% off Super Male Vitality at InfoWarsLife.com to introduce you to this powerful supplement. Visit InfoWarsLife.com today to secure your Super Male Vitality. InfoWarsLife.com. Ray in Illinois, he says he's a city council member. He wants to know what's next for the USA. Go ahead, Ray.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Joel. I've been a council member here for the past 3 years, and I actually got involved into doing this because of Alex and people like Alex and George and a few other like-minded people. And I want to say thank you for getting me involved. And I just hope that other people will get off the couch and instead of just complaining about what's going on, get involved some way or somehow. But, Joel, my question is, you talked about the timetable. What would happen, how significantly would that timetable go forward if an EMP pulse or a solar flare would hit North America like they've been talking about and wiping out our grid and our defenses going down? Would China and Russia say, hey, let's do it now instead of waiting, or what do you think about that?
Well, you know, that's a scenario that's been prognosticated by several people. Here's why I don't believe that an EMP will ever strike separate from an actual physical nuclear strike. The one thing an EMP doesn't do, and let me just tell you about the technology of an EMP. The latest data from the U.S. government and others is that it takes about 6 high-altitude nuclear weapons to blanket the whole U.S. to take down the whole grid in a very serious way, not just one. And so there's been a lot of hype about Iran sending a whole fleet of ships over towards our coast and that they're going to launch a missile off that. Just not technically very feasible to do that. It takes more than one missile. And even if it did happen, an EMP strike doesn't take out the military because it's been hardened. And so the military would know where it came from. They'd be able to retaliate so it doesn't achieve the purposes of either Russia and China or even a rogue state, you know, as if Iran would do that, which I don't believe they would. And so...
Sure, if they're going to do that, just smuggle a nuke into Manhattan and detonate it.
That's right. I mean, if you want to just make a show and get your country retaliated against, I mean, if you want to do something suicidal, there are easier ways to do that than to try to do it with a missile on a ship coming into. But I just don't think that's going to happen. It really is more technical than people think to throw a high-altitude nuclear weapon up there, and it's got to be...
Well, in the 60s, the Pentagon detonated big hydrogen bombs in the atmosphere, and it did knock out power, but they found it was sporadic through the atmosphere.
That's right. It is sporadic. It takes about 6 to blanket the whole U.S., and even then, as I say, it doesn't take down the military because they're hardened.
Now, a sun EMP could actually hit the whole country, the equivalent of a big flare. Why is there so much military-industrial complex hype? We get hit by guests constantly wanting to come on about EMP.
Well, I don't know. You know, government agents have been hyping a lot of things, and frankly, Alex, anybody who calls up, me included, and says, I'm an insider in government and I have some top secret information for you, I don't take it. Because nobody in today's NSA can get away with talking to anybody on our side without getting caught. And if they can do it week after week, you know it's permitted. It's not that they're really on our side.
Real stuff. It's when people are not going to be part of evil anymore. They blow the whistle like Snowden at great risk of themselves. Do you agree with what I just said, Joel?
And they get out. That's right. There's no way to stay a whistleblower and not get caught when you're inside government.
Well, I mean, I don't want to actually prohibit whistleblowers, but they found out who the state police guy was. And then we tried to fire him. He was senior. And I mean, I can say that because people know who it is on the inside. And then he was able to keep his job and basically get put on a desk for sending me that info.
Right. By the way, before we go on, I want to congratulate you, Alex, on outlasting Piers Morgan. You're still here and he's gone.
Well, not by any work of my own, but by God's good graces. But yeah, Piers Morgan, though, it shows the mindset of the globalists thinking that that would ever be popular.
Well, Americans just don't like somebody looking down their nose at them and being disgusted with our Second Amendment rights.
But see, there's a lot of good stuff happening. I see a lot of people wake, but like you said, it's either people are waking up or they're getting more into the darkness. I just don't know. It's going to get crazy.
Yeah, there's a great division taking place within our society. And, you know, the one hopeful thing I want to say about my scenario about this war coming in World War III, the hidden blessing of that comes through any war, even though there's a great deal of horror and terror in war, is that a separation of society happens and the good become better and the worst become worse and a lot of them die. And what's the best thing, though, is that the Lord will drive people out of the major corrupt metropolitan areas. There won't be any jobs left to hold them there. And I think he'll inspire them to relocate to places where they'll have more liberty, and then we can reconstitute liberty on a more regional and local basis, even though I don't think we're ever going to win it back on the national scene because of the power of this secret combination of power that we're dealing with.
Well, undoubtedly, they are animated by a spirit of evil and deception. Folks can get your fine book and the accompanying film that I produced, Strategic Relocation, at InfoWarsStore.com, and that supports all of our work. Invaluable information for you and your family. Joel, thanks for spending time with us.
My pleasure, Alex. You know, I still get people calling me and telling me about that film that you did with me on Strategic Relocation. It's still popular out there.
Well, I appreciate you coming and doing it and letting us put it out on the internet for free as well. It is on YouTube for free. It's a public service, but everybody should have the hard copy DVD on their shelf and to show friends and family. Joel, thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
You are watching the best of The Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.
Renowned author and expert Joel Skousen breaks down the globalist plan to shut down America and stage a new world war.
In one day, America will go from day to night. And if you haven't prepared in advance, there's not enough time to prepare in 24 hours, even if you saw it that early.
Coming to the Info War in November is our new documentary film presentation.
Strategic relocation is a systematic way to think strategically in the future about how do I safeguard.
Joel Skousen, Strategic Relocation.
The freeways are going to be crowded, they're going to run out of gasoline, they're going to run out of food, and then they're going to start to go north and south of those freeways.
Joel Skousen is renowned as one of the world's foremost experts in strategic relocation and the securing of your home.
We talk about natural disasters, the health environment, we talk about pollution, the water quality. My personal experience about being in every one of these states.
Government is digging in for the organized, incremental collapse of society and world war.
The U.S. isn't building huge underground bases and bunkers because of some terrorist threat. They know that a massive nuclear attack is coming. They want that attack to come. Most people won't even be ready and won't be able to get out of town when any of these nuclear weapons fall, because there'll be absolute panic.
There is no preparedness without strategy.
What I tell people is that you do have time. Prepare wisely in advance.
This Christmas, give the gift of preparedness. Strategic Relocation, the film, with Joel Skousen and Alex Jones.